How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Under Center College Football Podcast. I am Stone. I usually have my co-host Chandler here, but he is not able to meet with us tonight, but that is okay. Today, I am happy to share with you guys a little bit more about the greatest sport of all time, college football. If you're watching, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. We need as much support as we can get because we are very small right now. But we're trying to grow. We're trying to get bigger. And the more that you guys can help us and share the channel and videos, the more stuff that we can do for you guys. So we appreciate everyone who is watching and who is dialed into the channel. Today we're going to go over my personal college football power ratings. Now, I don't want to get this confused with rankings. We released our post-spring rankings back in May, and this is going to look very different. What I want to get at is rankings and ratings are not the same thing, okay? In the rankings, I would usually have some teams up higher that I wouldn't even have in this power rating. In fact, in our most recent episode, I have a couple teams who make the playoffs who I don't even have in my power rating list at all, because rankings and playoff determination and all of that are completely different than how good a team actually is. The playoff criteria is not built upon which team would be best on a neutral playing field, and that's what these power ratings are based on. So super excited to to be able to share this with you guys today. I'm just going to get right into it one moment while I throw this up on our screen. All right, awesome guys. As you can see, we are now looking at my personal top 20 best teams in college football. Now, this criteria, again, going back to what I said previously, is based upon who I would be most confident to win a game when it comes to a neutral playing field. So we're going to go from 20 to 1, starting off with the Auburn Tigers. Now, the Auburn Tigers I did not have in my top 25 post-spring rankings. Well, they're in a loaded conference. What's happening with Auburn is because they're in such a loaded conference, they would not fare well when it comes to actual rankings and an ability to make it into the playoffs. So Auburn, I think they have a good roster. This is probably the best roster they've had under Hugh Freeze. This is Hugh Freeze's third year at Auburn, and he's kind of getting into the swing of things, being able to develop his own kind of a system, which he was not really able to do so previously, trying to catch up from their lack of performance over the last couple of years. Right now they got transfer from Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold, who, if you look at his performance at Oklahoma, was not who we expected him to be. No disrespect to Jackson Arnold, but at Oklahoma he was expected to be this prolific five-star quarterback, come in and bring the Sooners closer to the playoffs, hopefully a playoff berth last year, and that's just not what happened. Although they did have moments where they shone, really Jackson Arnold didn't really pop off much. Now he's at Auburn. Now he's given another opportunity. Still a big SEC school, and I would argue that he has way better weapons than he had last season with Cam Coleman and now recent addition, Eric Singleton Jr., who came from Georgia Tech. They might have, some could argue that they have the best wide receiver core in the SEC. Me personally, I probably wouldn't stand behind that statement, but the fact that that statement is able to be said with some credibility behind it means that they have something going for them. I think that if we want to talk about the Iron Bowl, if there's going to be a year for Auburn to make a presence in the SEC, stir stuff up. Do I think Auburn is going to make the playoffs? No. I showed my playoff rankings last night, my playoff prediction, and Auburn was not in it. It was nowhere near my playoff rankings. Do I think they could stir things up? Yes. I understand my predictions are not going to be 100% accurate, and if Auburn were to have a year where they could do something to potentially ruin one of these teams that I have higher ranked, one of their seasons, this would be the year under Hugh Freeze with a new quarterback, which I would say that Jackson Arnold is a better quarterback than Peyton Thorne. And I think that if he can perform correctly, if he can be the player that was expected coming out of high school, and he doesn't even have to be that player. He just needs to be at least manageable. I don't think he was a good game manager last season for Oklahoma. But if he can be at least just a guy who can make the plays when necessary, he doesn't need to go out, he doesn't need to be a superstar, then that's going to give them an opportunity to shine and ruin some SEC fans' hearts, or break their hearts, excuse me. But yeah, let's go on forward. At 19, I've got Arizona State. Arizona State, they had a crazy season last year, projected to be the worst team in the Big 12, ended up winning the Big 12. So the Big 12 is kind of I think every time I rank a Big 12 team, even in my playoff prediction, which I didn't talk much about, it could be anyone. I mean, after seeing what happened last season, I could say Kansas. In Kansas did not play as well as they were expected to last season, but I could say Kansas is a top team. They could win the Big 12, and they could win the Big 12. Given the right circumstances and the correct path, they could pull it off. But I'm not here to talk about Kansas and the Jayhawks. I'm here to talk about Arizona State. I think Arizona State is a good team. I think they're returning a lot. The reason why I don't have them higher is because they're not returning the best player that they had last season in Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo was their offense. I mean, go rewatch highlights from the Texas game. Every single highlight was him. He threw touchdowns. He had one crazy reception. He would run the ball like a maniac. He was just a scary individual. And they don't have him, which that doesn't mean that they can't have a solid run game going forward, but they're going to have to lean a lot more on their quarterback and their receiver. And I think they have an amazing quarterback and wide receiver duo in Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson. I think that if they do lean on them, that they will find success, that they can win games and they can be very successful. But I don't know if they're going to be able to repeat the level of excellence they were able to perform last season because they're missing Cam Skattebo. But I am still very high on them. I have them as the 19th best team in the nation. I think that there could be 18 teams that could beat them in a neutral playing field. But regardless, we'll move on forward. Let's go Ole Miss. Let's talk about Ole Miss. Ole Miss, interesting team last year. They lose to Kentucky, but then they also beat Georgia. They had Jackson Dart, and Jackson Dart played very well, first-round pick, and they are bringing in Austin Simmons, or they're not bringing him in, but he's going to take that starting role, and I feel good about Austin Simmons. I mean, if you watched the Georgia game and you saw Austin Simmons drive, I mean, he looked great, and I think he's going to be a great quarterback. Ole Miss just has a lot of question marks. They lose a lot defensively, especially in their defensive line. They played very well defensively last year, which is not usually Lane Kiffin's style of football. He's usually seen more as an offensive mastermind, which he is. But they were able to be successful defensively last year, and I think that's what almost got them in the playoffs. They weren't really in the conversation when it came to the day that they chose the people to make it in, but they were close. I mean, if they had not lost to Kentucky, they probably would have made it. There were just a small minor mess-ups that they had last season that kept them from making the playoffs, and this season they can't repeat that. And they're not going to have as much depth defensively as they did last year in order to help them keep from making those same mistakes. They're going to be relying a lot on the new starting quarterback, Austin Simmons, to come in and play a defining role. Do I think that they have to come in and, like, this is the year? Austin Simmons has to be ready. He has to take us to a championship. I don't think this is the year. I think that this is going to be more of a year to set up the following season. Austin Simmons, once he returns, not this season, but next season, he could be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. He could be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. We just haven't seen enough from him. I think that there's a high chance that he ends up being super successful. But for now, I have him at 18. great team. I like Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin is awesome, and if he keeps it up, I mean, what he's done at Ole Miss is amazing. He's been able to produce and be a great coach and a funny guy on Twitter to keep everyone activated in the offseason. If he coached as well as he was funny, then he would be winning a lot of games, and he is winning a lot of games. Let's move on. Kansas State. This is my Big 12 representative in the playoffs. I think that they win the Big 12 this upcoming season. Again, when I was speaking about Arizona State, I mentioned how difficult it is to pick apart the Big 12. That's why Kansas State is the highest rated Big 12 team on this list, and they are at 17. There are, outside of the top 20, probably 5 good teams that are just about that same area. This year, and it's not just with the Big 12, but the Big 12 is a great example of how stacked and condensed it is at the top. At the top of the Big 12, you've got like 6 teams. You got like 7 or 8 teams that are really good, that any of them could win it. And I think that's kind of the same way with college football right now. I think a lot of these teams from 1 to 20 are very rearrangeable. And even outside of the top 20, you could throw in some more of those Big 12 teams, some other SEC teams, maybe a Big 10 team. Ultimately, I just want to share that because it was very difficult to choose my Big 12 representative. And in fact, it might be completely incorrect because we don't know what's going to happen with the Big 12. Who is least likely to win the Big 12? I couldn't tell you. But whoever it is, I don't know, maybe it's their year. Because, I mean, if I repeated that last season, people would call me crazy, and then it would have looked like a genius by the end of the season. But anyways, Kansas State. I think Kansas State is very good. Again, in my last episode, I talked about Will Howard, talked about how Will Howard, he left because Kansas State was bought into the Avery Johnson system. Avery Johnson is a great quarterback. His hair reminds me of Trevor Lawrence, and his play style reminds me of Trevor Lawrence. He was expected to come in last season and ball out, and not to say that he didn't play well, but he played like a first-year starter. I mean, you don't expect perfection out of a first-year starter. He didn't have a good game against BYU. Well, not a good game at all against BYU, but he showed flashes of, I hate to use the term franchise because these aren't franchises, these are just colleges. But he looks like their future guy. And this year he has an opportunity to make a statement. Chandler said in our last episode that he believes Avery Johnson will be top 10 in Heisman voting. I can't say I disagree with him. I think Avery Johnson has an opportunity to because he's in the Big 12, to make a better, bigger statement name for himself and project himself to be one of the better quarterbacks in the nation. And, I mean, Kansas State, they've been good in the past, and it's kind of, I just feel like it's their time. We'll move on. Michigan, number 16. This is an interesting one. Michigan, last season, they did not look like the Michigan we would usually see. But with that being said, Michigan's most recent victories have been against Ohio State and the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't think there is another team right now that has as good, if not, I don't think any other team has as good of their most recent 2 wins as Michigan does. Except, you could argue Ohio State because their most recent last 2 games were wins against Notre Dame and why am I blanking? Oh, Texas, yeah. So it's either Ohio State or Michigan, but Michigan beat Ohio State. Michigan beat Alabama, minus starters. They didn't have a quarterback last season, so they looked very disappointing. They just looked underwhelming at times last season. They couldn't throw the ball at all. And they still managed to perform when it was most necessary, although preferably you'd have them perform all the time. I think with the addition of Bryce Underwood, who is supposed to be a remarkable quarterback coming in as a true freshman. They are going to revive that pass game that they have been lacking. I would argue that they were lacking it also under J.J. McCarthy. Not that he was a bad quarterback, but they just relied a lot more on Blake. Why am I blanking? They're running back. Blake Corum. There we go. And now Bryce Underwood has an opportunity to be like the guy on the team. I would argue Blake Corum was the guy on the team a couple years ago as their running back with Donovan Edwards in the backfield as well. And now Bryce Underwood, he has the opportunity to be like the leader of the offense as a true freshman. So we don't know. He's stepping into a role. He could be great. He could look like a first-year starter. I expect him to look like a first-year starter, which isn't a bad thing. But he could also just completely fall apart because he's never taken a collegiate snap before. But it's still Michigan. Even with all this stuff that's happening with the NCAA, it doesn't matter when toe hits the rubber or toe hits the leather. It doesn't matter. So Michigan, I have them at 16. I think they're a good team, and I think that they're going to be better than last season. But we'll move on. Oklahoma, number 15. A lot of people are very high in Oklahoma. They have been this entire offseason. I think with the addition of John Mateer and Jade Knott and John Mateer's previous offensive coordinator from Washington State, they are going to be a lot better offensively. Last year, they couldn't really get anything started ever offensively with Jackson Arnold. But now they have a potential Heisman winner in their backfield, under center, I might say. And they haven't had a quarterback of his caliber since, probably Caleb Williams. I would argue he's better than Spencer Rattler. I think that he is going to elevate Oklahoma to be a contender again. Again, I don't have them making my playoff, but I think that they could be a team that could ruin someone else's chances. And if my prediction is incorrect, they could be a team to make the playoff. I mean, they beat Alabama last season. They didn't beat Alabama. They murdered Alabama last season. So there were times where even in such a poorer situation, they still managed to get it done. And they're in a far better situation. Brent Venables, genius defensively. They're going to have a top 15 defense, potentially top 10 defense next season. I expect that out of Brent Venables. And I think that offensively they're going to just look a whole lot better. So Oklahoma, I think they'll be good. Go to number 14. You have the Miami Hurricanes. Miami, they were an interesting team last season. They were really good at the beginning of the year, and then they dropped 2 losses right before the playoffs and ended up missing it. They did have the number 1 overall pick in Cam Ward, which is a huge plus, but he's not there anymore. They have Carson Beck now. We don't know how to analyze Carson Beck. When I say we, I mean us people, us college football fans. Because if you look 2 years ago, Carson Beck looked like a superstar. He looked like he was going to be the best quarterback in the SEC, and he was number 1 at Heisman odds. Now you look at him and you say he had a terrible season last year. He is turnover prone, and he had to leave Georgia because he could not perform in the SEC. So he had to go to the ACC. I am not as low on Carson Beck as others may be. I don't expect him to play at a Heisman caliber, although who's to say he won't. But I do expect him to be good. If you compare, because I mean, look at Garrett Nussmeier from last season: 4,000 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Look at Carson Beck from last season. It was about 3,600 passing yards, I believe. So it was 400 less. That's a significant amount. But same 29 touchdowns, same 12 interceptions. One guy is almost atop of the leaderboard for Heisman odds this year, and another guy is looked at as he had a down year, bad season, too turnover prone, whatever. And I think that when you, look at it like that, it's like, why are we sitting here talking so poorly about Carson Beck? Because he performed like an animal the season prior. So we expected him to be like Joe Burrow when he ended up just playing as, just an average quarterback, maybe a little below average. But again, I think that this year he could step in. Do I think he's going to perform as well as Cam Ward? We're yet to see. I don't think so. Cam Ward played amazing last season, but I think he's going to play well. I think he'll fit into the system all right. Mario Cristobal, he knows what he's doing. He's going to take care of him with the offensive line. He'll have weapons around him. I think that he'll do well. But we'll see. Miami, 14. Yeah, and they are my third team in the ACC, who's right behind Georgia Tech, number 13. I'm very high on Georgia Tech. In fact, I mentioned in my previous episode, talking about my playoff prediction, I predict Georgia Tech to beat Georgia this upcoming season. Now, granted, I understand. You're looking at this, you're like, what the heck are you talking about? They're going to be playing on a neutral playing field, and you have Georgia ranked 5 and Georgia Tech ranked 13, and you think Georgia Tech's going to beat Georgia? Well, that's because upsets exist. That's because when it comes down to just football, roster, coach, all of that, I think Georgia is a far better team. But when it comes to what the season has looked like, when it comes to the fans, the environment that's happening, when it comes to all these other things, these other factors that are going to be a part of it, then I look at it and I say, Georgia Tech almost beat Georgia last season in Georgia, and I think that they're going to be better this year. Did they lose Eric Singleton? Yes. But I wouldn't even argue that Eric Singleton was the most shining factor of that offense. I think that Jamal Haynes and Haynes King will run speed options and go for 6 rushing touchdowns, and I think they could pull it off against Georgia. I do have them second in the ACC behind Clemson, which we'll get to in a little bit. I like Georgia Tech. I think they're super cool. I think that if they have a year where they can cause a mess in the ACC, this is that season, and I think that that's what they're hoping to do, and I think that they're going to get a playoff spot out of it. So we'll move on. We'll go to Texas A&M. Now we're entering our top 12, which the interesting thing about my top 12 is I believe 4 of these teams in my top 12 don't make my 12-team playoff. I'll explain a little bit more. Again, that has a lot to do with, is their schedule manageable? That's really what it goes down to. Who are they playing? When are they playing them? Like, what does their game stretches look like? And I mean, you get a team like Illinois, who I don't even have in my top 20, and you look at their schedule, and then you get a team like Florida, who I have in my top 10, and you look at their schedule. Which team looks like they're more likely to go 10-2, go 11-1, even go 9-3? It would be Illinois. So I'll break that down a little bit more once I get to Florida, but we'll go to Texas A&M. Texas A&M, I'm at 12. I am kind of iffy about Texas A&M just because of the recent history. Texas 8-4. They can't get away from the 8-4 allegations because they kind of do that. Mike Elko, he's entering, I believe, a second season at Texas A&M, and I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to do an amazing job at Texas A&M, and I think he's already done a good job. Last year, they had an opportunity to go into the SEC championship game. If they had beat Texas, they would have played for a playoff spot. Okay, I think they're going to be better than last season. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs? No. But I like Marcel Reed. I like their backfield with, what are their names? Running backs. Let me pull it up just one brief second. They have Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens. Okay, this might be the best rushing attack in the SEC. They might have the best running back duo in the SEC, I should say. And we already know Marcel Reed can run the football. So I think that Texas A&M will improve from last season. For now, I have them at 12. I think that could they get better? Yes. Could they get worse? Yes. But I think that for now, number 12 is a good spot to leave them at, considering we don't really know what happens in Texas A&M. I mean, they are always, top 10 in recruiting rankings. They are always super hyped, and then they always wet the bed. And I just feel like if it's one of those teams where I don't know if I can put my faith in them until I can actually see them get over the hump. I mean, I feel like in order for me to go all in on Texas A&M, they have to make the playoffs. They have to get into the SEC championship game. It's been too long. They've been in the SEC for too long. They've been expected to win for too long, and they haven't quite done it to the level that they have expected themselves to. So for that, I'm leaving them at 12. Number 11, South Carolina. I mean, there are only two teams on this list who I would say could potentially have the best offensive and defensive player in the nation. That's South Carolina, and that's the reigning national champions, Ohio State. South Carolina, I spoke about in our last episode, is not a team you would expect to even be in that kind of a conversation because they are not usually recognized to be that good. But they have Dylan Stewart defensively and Lenore Sellers offensively. I am high on both of them. I am very high on Lenore Sellers. I think Lenore Sellers could potentially be the best quarterback in the SEC. Now, I will get into that a little bit later in another episode when we talk about our Heisman rankings. But for now, I think South Carolina, with those two leading the charge, are going to be very good. I had them ranked number 10 in my post-spring rankings. Do I have them making the playoffs? I do not. Why? Because their schedule. They have a rough schedule. They play LSU, they play Clemson, they play Alabama. Those are three very losable games. Not to mention they also play, I believe they play Oklahoma. I don't have it memorized in my brain, but the point is they have a severely difficult schedule, and I just don't know how to feel about them pulling all of that off. I think my biggest question mark for them is their receiving room. They have Nick Harbor. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. He's like the fastest dude on the planet. But then they don't have much else to complement that. I understand Lenore Sellers. He can run the ball if needed. I mean, he can pull it down and take off, but it's always nice to be able to have a pass game to rely on. And I think Lenore Sellers is a good enough quarterback to be able to pass and be super efficient and effective. But the weapons that he has around him are not to the level, or at least to my expectation, of a team that would be a playoff contender. So, and for that reason, I have South Carolina at 11. Although I really do like South Carolina, and I think I would love to see them make the playoffs. Chandler has them making the playoffs, and I would just really like to see that, but I think their path is just way too difficult. So before we continue, halfway through our rankings, thank you for staying. If you've made it this far, make sure you subscribe, make sure you click the like button, make sure you share with your friend, with your neighbor, with your parents, with your brothers, with your sisters, with your children, whoever you think, with your coworker, your boss, your least favorite person. It doesn't matter, because we're talking about college football. Everyone loves college football. And thank you for sticking out thus far, and we'll just continue right through. Florida, number 10. I spoke about them briefly. I like Florida a lot. I think DJ Lagway is another player that I would say is similar to Lenore Sellers in the sense that they could be the best quarterback in the SEC. Again, there are a lot of quarterbacks that could be the best quarterback in the SEC. The thing about DJ Lagway is he going to remain healthy? If DJ Lagway remains healthy, he could be the best quarterback in the nation. But if he doesn't remain healthy, then they're going to lose games, like a lot. Last year, they probably would have beat Georgia if DJ Lagway didn't go down. But he did go down, and they didn't beat Georgia. If they want to win the big games, they have to have him in the game. I think that they are a team that is going to break a lot of other teams' hearts because they play such a difficult schedule that so many teams on their schedule are going to make the playoffs. They play Texas. They play Georgia. They play LSU. I believe they play Ole Miss. I could be incorrect about that one. But they play a ridiculous schedule. I think it's the hardest schedule in the nation. And if they want to do something, I think the best thing that they could do is go to the playoffs and go crazy. But I think that it would be acceptable, it would be considered successful for them to go 9-3, maybe even 8-4, because their schedule is so difficult that going a record of 8-4 or 9-3 is something to holler about, something to yell hooray at your TV screen about, because it's going to be crazy hard. That's why I don't have them make the playoffs. I think that they would be a great playoff team. I don't know if I'd put them in that Tier 1 caliber. Thus far, I've talked about teams I would consider as Tier 2 teams, but they are right on the verge of greatness. And I think that this season is a season that's going to define the following season. I think DJ Lagway, if he can stay healthy, if they can go like 9-3, if they go 10-2, they're making the playoffs. Because if anyone goes 10-2 in that schedule, they're going to be one of the best teams in the nation. But if they even go 9-3 and miss the playoffs, I think that sets them up for an insane 2026 season. But we'll move on forward. We have number 9, Oregon. The Oregon Ducks, last season, they go into the Big Ten for their first year and completely wipe out everyone on their schedule. Perfect clean slate into the playoffs, number 1 seed. And they have a bye, first game, they get murdered by Ohio State, who are the eventual national champions. How do I feel? It's weird. I talked about this in our previous episode because Oregon is a team that, they win the big games? Kind of. They won the Big Ten, which that's a huge accomplishment, especially in your first season. They kind of ran the Pac-12 when it was still assembled over the last recent few years, but what was this? This was Dan Lanning as a head coach, his first playoff appearance, and he gets absolutely murdered by a team that he had beat during the season. And they lose their starting quarterback. He's gone. He's gone to the NFL. Not that Dylan Gabriel was the greatest quarterback in the world and that he changed all the games they played in, but that is a big subtraction. Now they have a new guy in, Dante Moore. What do we know about Dante Moore? Well, he was a 5-star. He started one season at UCLA, transfers to Oregon. He sits and he waits his turn, and now he's ready to go under center and go crazy. I think Dante Moore is going to play well. I think he's going to play spectacular. I think he's going to be a fantastic quarterback. I think that he is going to play – I think he will play better than you would expect a first-year quarterback to play. But I don't think he's going to play as good as someone who you would throw into this is one of the best quarterbacks in the nation conversation. I think that it's going to take just some time, a short, brief amount of time, one season, for him to cement himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. With that being said, great team. I think they're going to be good defensively. Issue is Evan Stewart's hurt. He got hurt this offseason. He was going to be, I would assume he would be their number 1 guy, but then now they have DeCorian Moore, true freshman, who I've heard amazing things about. I've heard that he's going to be similar. So people have compared him to Jeremiah Smith. Do I think he's going to be Jeremiah Smith? I think if we see another player go from high school to college and excel at the level that Jeremiah Smith played at, it would be generational and it would be insane. And the odds of that happening are very low. Even someone like Ryan Williams coming out of high school, that's a crazy thing. And I think DeCorian Moore has an opportunity, and I think he's going to take him by the horns. And I think he's going to be very successful. I don't know if he's going to be their number 1 guy, considering the fact that Evan Stewart, I believe he's expected to come back sometime during the season. And if he does, I'd expect him to be the number 1 receiver, unless DeCorian Moore just steps in and he cements himself as that guy. But there are just a lot of question marks around Oregon. Mekhi Hughes, great running back. I think he's going to play well. I think he's going to be one of the better running backs in the Big Ten. But we're just yet to see. There's a lot of question marks because a lot of teams lost a lot of stuff this offseason. So Oregon, number 9. We'll move on to number 8, Notre Dame. They played in the national championship last year, and they kept it close towards the end, but eventually they ended up losing, unfortunately. Riley Leonard, their starting quarterback, he leaves for the NFL, and they have C.J. Carr coming in, and we all expect him to be the starter. I expect him to play well. I expect him to play at the level of a first-year starter, though. I mentioned this in our most previous episode, people expect him to be one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play for Notre Dame, which don't quote me on that. I didn't say it. I said people expect that, okay? I'm yet to make any sort of a stance like that on C.J. Carr until I see him take a snap. But I think that he's going to perform well. I think he has the best tailback in the nation in Jeremiah Love in the backfield with him, and I think he's going to take care of him. I believe they're going to rely on their run game a lot. Although they do have Jaden Greathouse, great receiver, he's going to play well. I think he's going to complement C.J. Carr and help him kind of get into a good rhythm. But it's hard to see Notre Dame just because of their history as a program as of recently. It's hard to see them kind of excel and separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Or I guess even just put themselves in the front of the pack like they did kind of last season. I mean, they played the national championship game. Not very many people play in the national championship game. Only 2 teams will play in a national championship game every year. And that was kind of their opportunity. I don't know if they're going to be able to repeat something like that, but I still think they're a great team. I think they're going to play well. I think that they're going to they're not in a conference, so there's not much of a conference for them to represent. But if they were in a conference, I believe that they would be in contention to win their conference just about every single year. But for now, they're number 8. I like them a lot. Let's move on. Number 7, LSU. This one I didn't get into in our last episode, which was my fault. But I believe a lot of people are confused. What the heck is LSU doing as the 7th highest rated team in the nation and not making the playoffs? Well, it's just the SEC schedules. I believe they have I don't know if I would say they have a difficult path per se. I mean, well, I believe they do, but I don't think that it's at the level of a Florida or an Oklahoma. But I believe that other teams just have more manageable paths. Illinois, you're going to get a group of 5 reps, so UNLV, who I had as my group of 5 rep. And then I've got, Oregon, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Clemson, and I've also got Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech it's similar to the Illinois situation, a far more manageable schedule. And I believe that, if you switched LSU with Georgia Tech's schedule, if you switch LSU with Illinois' schedule, I believe that they make it 100%. There's no question. I have them the 7th best team in the nation. And, who's to say they don't make it next season, I guess, except for me, because they weren't in my prediction. But I think they're a good enough team to play in the playoff. I believe they're a good enough team to win the whole thing. It's just they need to attack their schedule. Brian Kelly hasn't won a game, a season opener, since he's started there. And they start the season off with Clemson. I like the integrity. I like the aggressiveness, wanting to start off with tough opponents. But if you can't beat the tough opponent, then it's going to be a lot harder for me to say that you are going to make the playoffs. Me personally, I do not see LSU going into Death Valley at Clemson and beating them. And if they start off the season 0-1, you know how difficult it's going to be for them to be able to get back on their feet. They're going to feel just degraded. They're going to feel like just a piece of crap. And I don't know if it's going to be a lot harder for them to, reassemble themselves. Now, who's to say they won't be like Ohio State after the Michigan loss and then go crazy, right? But it's a difficult schedule, difficult world we live in. Sorry, LSU. I love you guys. Keep grinding. Garrett Nussmeier, think he could win the Heisman. He's going to be in contention for that. They have a great receiver core. Barry and Brown, Nick Anderson, 2 amazing receivers who could tear up the SEC. I could be completely wrong. They could go completely undefeated. They're a team that is good enough to go undefeated. I just don't feel it this season. Some people would disagree, argue with me on that. But let's move on. Ohio State, number 6. Some people might say this is low because they are the reigning national champs. I just think it's difficult to gauge a team like Ohio State because they lose their top 2 running backs, they lose their starting quarterback, and It's all feels very new. Um, they lose their defensive coordinator to go to Penn State. There's a lot of newness happening, and I think they're going to be fantastic. I think that I have them playing in the Big Ten championship game and losing to Penn State, but I think they could beat Penn State. They could be one of the best teams in the nation. I just feel like how difficult is it to go, back to back, and to be able to replenish all the pieces that you just lost. It's not very common. Georgia did it a couple years ago, but that era, and I mean, I understand the transfer portal was still around then, but that era of the transfer portal is not the same as this era. I feel like the transfer portal has been completely unleashed, and now it can go as crazy as it would like, and it's a lot more difficult to find those pieces to, put everything back together into a perfect mold that's going to have you go undefeated or have you just perform at the same level as they did last season. I think Ohio State's great. I think that, number 6 team in the nation, but I need to see something on Julian Sand. We have a lot of question marks for new quarterbacks. But Julian Sand, I think he's going to be great. He was an Elite 11 winner out of high school. So let's move on. We'll go to Georgia. Georgia Bulldogs. They still have Kirby. They're still Georgia. They're still in the SEC. They won the SEC last season in a year that people would consider a down year for Georgia, which if you're winning the SEC in a down year, then you better be performing like you are a unit, a tank, an unstoppable force every other year. They lose their starting quarterback to Miami. Some people would argue that's a plus. I don't know how to feel. Gunnar Stockton, he had flashes of really good play last season, but we are still yet to see all of Gunnar Stockton unleashed. They have the addition of Zachariah Branch, who I really like, coming out of USC. I think a lot of people are going to be kind of forgetful about Zachariah Branch. He's going to be a little bit under the radar coming into next season. I think he's going to, maybe not immediately, but he's going to make a presence in the SEC. A lot of people will question Mike Bobo, their offensive coordinator, and his ability to play, or I guess call plays. I think Mike Bobo is a fine offensive coordinator, and I think that he will be able to perform at the level that he needs to. I understand they had kind of a lack of a run game last season. Okay, that's not a good thing, especially for Georgia standards, SEC standards. Nate Frazier, he, I believe, is going to be one of the best running backs in the SEC, if not the country, and I think that he is going to have, I guess I wouldn't consider it a bounce-back year for Nate Frazier, but Georgia will have a bounce-back year using Nate Frazier to succeed. Georgia, still Georgia. Kirby, still Kirby. His defense is going to be really good. I believe that they're going to improve from last season. So, yeah, let's move on. Number 4, the Alabama Crimson Tide, which is kind of an interesting one because they're a team that missed the playoffs last season and are coming off of a year that would also be considered a down year for the Crimson Tide with 3 regular season losses and then an additional loss to Michigan. And I think that they're going to be very good. They return so much and they have so much depth. And the biggest question mark for them is at the quarterback position. Ty Simpson, he was announced to be their starter, and I think that he's going to perform really well. He has great weapons around him. They might have the best, I believe that they have the best wide receiver core in the SEC with Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton. I think that in order for them to kind of get that presence again, to be considered a top 5 team in the nation, is to get that run game back and less inconsistencies offensively. Jalen Milroe was kind of inconsistent for them last season. I believe Ty Simpson, he does not have to be the greatest quarterback in the world. He doesn't have to be Superman. But if he can go out there and just not look like a bozo sometimes, and he can just perform, even if he ends up being kind of a game manager, with the weapons around him, they're going to make him look like a great quarterback. And I think he's going to be better than just a game manager. I think he's going to be a great quarterback. He's waited in line. People forget he was a 5-star coming out of high school, and he's going to perform, at least in my opinion. But Kalen DeBoer entering his second season, we understand Kalen DeBoer is always successful in his second season. And Ryan Grubb returns, which is a huge addition because Kalen DeBoer is kind of Batman and Ryan Grubb is his Robin. But, I mean, you could argue that they're both Batman, and when they're together, that everything just clicks. I think Alabama has an opportunity to push what happened last season away and just focus on what they have ahead of them and make everyone pay for what they said negatively about them. But we'll move forward. Penn State, number 3. Penn State, they're the highest representative for the Big Ten. I have them winning the Big Ten. I forgot to mention I do have Alabama winning the SEC, although they are not the highest SEC representative in this power ratings. But Penn State, number 3, they have an opportunity to do something that they have never done, which is win the big game, which is kind of the similar vibe that I get for LSU under Brian Kelly and for Oregon a little bit, although Oregon did win the Big Ten last season. But Penn State, when I say the big game, I mean the big game. And I'm not talking Ohio State and Michigan. I mean the national championship game. I think that James Franklin utilized the transfer portal at the best that he could to get receivers. Trevor Pena leading the way. And he was amazing at Syracuse. And now that Drew Aller has someone to throw to, with the addition of those two monsters in the backfield, and Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, I think that they are going to perform incredibly well. They are always going to have one of the best defenses in the nation. We know that. We know that about Penn State. It's a common theme. It's going to happen year-round, or I guess year by year. But if they can get going offensively, they are going to be terrifying. Not that they weren't terrifying in the most recent years. They've always been great. But when's the last time they've won a big game? When's the last time that they upset someone? It hasn't happened in a very long time. And I think if James Franklin can't do it this season, then he's not going to have an opportunity like this again. And I don't know if I would consider this an underdog story, but James Franklin, he's been losing those games for too long. And I like the idea of him just coming in and him making a presence and reminding everyone that Penn State is here and that they are ready to compete. So Penn State, my number 3 team, will go on. Number 2, we've got the Clemson Tigers. Clemson. Oh, Dabo Swinney. I love Dabo Swinney, actually. I mentioned this in our most recent episode. I think Clemson, over the last few seasons, because of their lack of desire to utilize the transfer portal, they have not performed at a level that has been, I guess, expected considering their previous years. And some people would consider them having down seasons. Me personally, I think that they were still they've always been a great team, even these last few seasons that they haven't played to the expectation that they keep themselves to. But they haven't been gone. They haven't dropped off the face of the earth. They haven't had an Oklahoma season, like last season where Oklahoma just randomly becomes just not good. They haven't really gone out of relevance. They just haven't been fully there in the conversation. And this is a season where, their number 1 returning production. They still have Dabo Swinney, which in my opinion is a top 2 head coach in college football. They have receivers. They went crazy in the transfer portal and got themselves people to throw to. And I think that Cade Klubnik is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. He could win the Heisman. I think they have a manageable schedule. I could see them going undefeated. And I think that they win the ACC and that they make a real presence in the playoffs. I have them winning my national champion. I have them winning the national championship. They are my national champions. I think that Dabo Swinney has an opportunity to kind of prove himself to still be one of the best coaches in the nation because people have kind of thrown him under the radar as of recently. I haven't. I refuse to throw Dabo Swinney under the radar. I think that everyone needs to keep an eye out for Clemson. Not that they don't think they're a good team, but once the playoffs hit, some teams might think that, they're just not going to get it done. They haven't been able to get it done as of recently. Well, Dabo's changed things a little bit. He used the transfer portal just a little bit, okay? But he's still doing things his way. And that's a huge thing to do. There are not a lot of people in this sport in this day and age who are willing to do everything they can to do things a little different than how everyone else would want. But we'll move on. They are my national champions, but they're not my number one team as of right now, because all my playoff predictions are based on predictions and what I think is going to happen in the future. But what I see right now, currently, in college football, the number one team in the nation, Texas Longhorns. You have Steve Sarkisian. He is one of the best coaches in the nation. He has an opportunity to win the SEC. He played for the SEC championship game last season and did not get it done. He lost to Georgia twice. Some people might say Georgia is similar to a kryptonite for Steve Sarkisian, and I can see where they're coming from for that. They played Georgia this year, but I don't know if Georgia is going to be ready for them, for Arch Manning. No one in the nation, I guess except for Texas and Arch Manning, no one knows what Arch Manning's going to look like. Honestly, not even Texas, not even Arch Manning. I'm sure they expect him to be amazing. I expect him to be amazing. I expect him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, but also the whole nation expects him to be something. We don't know. There's a chance that he comes in, he's just the game manager. Even being a game manager, they are still going to be insane. Their defensive line, they lose players to the NFL and they just restock them like it's nothing. They have Colin Simmons, one of the best edge rushers in the nation. Anthony Hill Jr. at linebacker. He might be the best linebacker in the nation. And then, of course, they have Arch Manning. I believe Texas to be a team similar to Ohio State and South Carolina. As in, they could have the two best players, or they could have the best offensive and defensive player on their team, being Arch Manning, because we don't know yet, but he could be the best player in the nation, and then Colin Simmons or Anthony Hill Jr. You've got two options defensively. So the point is, Texas, I think, is going to make a name for themselves, and I think they are going to perform very well. I expect them to be in the SEC championship game, although when it comes down the line to predictions, I don't have them pulling it off completely. I think that as of right now, I think they're the best team in the nation. So these are my power ratings. They are very fluid. What will be happening is every single week I will be updating them to choose who I think will, continue their dominance or who's going to slip up or whatever's going to happen. But it is going to be changing constantly. I'll keep everyone updated. Thank you for watching this episode. If you have any problems with this list, if you disagree, if you agree, if you think this was awesome, if you fell asleep while watching, it doesn't matter. Wake up. College football is in less than 2 weeks. Kickoff for our first game is in less than 2 weeks. It is right around the corner. We have waited all offseason and it is finally here. So everyone get excited, grab your popcorn, get ready to watch a movie. But thank you all for being here with me today, and have a great rest of your day.